Hello, everyone, and welcome to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince.
Vince, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you, Kevin?
It has been a while since we've done a regular podcast.
Man, good to see you in this audio format.
Yeah, I don't even know what number we're on. I stopped keeping track when we were doing the commentaries.
I think we are on number after begins. I think that's the number we're on.
That's what it is. Anyway, we're probably in like the, late teens, early 20s. Anyway, we're not going to stop doing the commentaries. We're totally going to go back to that. And that's not to say that we won't also do these periodically from time to time. But we've been enjoying the commentaries. People seem to really like those, so we've been kind of focusing on those lately with the podcast. But anyway, today is kind of a special podcast because we have a viewer who is working on a school project and asked us to answer some questions for him. And instead of doing an interview with us, he asked us to do it on a Geeks Not Nerds, and I looked at the questions and thought, well, we might want to flesh this out a little bit more than a GNN, so we'll do a podcast on it. Hopefully he enjoys this and gets a lot out of it, and I thought it would be fun to make him take more notes. Anyway, so our questions...
Get your pencil ready!
Our multiple questions about the same basic topic today comes from AK231199. Sounds like a very big gun. And he asks us these three questions. This is basically about the popularity of superheroes right now in this day and age. Basically, his overarching topic that he's going with is trying to answer the question of why superheroes are so popular now. Right now in our current present day.
It's because they're cool. We're done. See you next time. Wow. Have a good day.
I guess it could have been a Geeks Not Nerds. All right, 20 seconds on the timer. Anyway, so
20 seconds.
I'll read each question, and then we'll go ahead and answer them one by one. You ready, Vince? The first thing he asks is, do you guys think general audiences are more interested in the superhero genre now than they were 10 or even 20 years ago? The second question is, if yes, why do you think this is? I'm glad these are all opinion questions, I'm glad that it's... That
Tell us the facts!
Don't have to be Wikipedia. If yes, why do you think this is? Is it simply an extension of people's enjoyment of action movies, or is there something deeper? And the third question is, do you think we've seen a peak in interest in the genre with the Avengers and Dark Knight, or... is Avengers and Dark Knight Rises, or is there more room to grow? Those are the three questions. I think those are well thought out, and I think there's plenty of stuff for us to talk about. Also, I want to say that we are absolutely honored that somebody wanted to use us as an empirical resource for research. So thanks.
Indeed.
Thanks very much. That's absolutely awesome.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, now we're going to do our absolute best to answer these questions.
Thanks for thinking we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna pretend really hard like we know what we're talking about, and hopefully that will help you BS a great paper. Anyway, here we go. No, I'm kidding. That was a total joke. Anyway. Here we go. So the first question, do we think general audiences are more interested in the superhero genre now than they were 10 or 20 years ago? What do you think, Vince?
I think they are more interested. I think to some extent it's partially because I think that now that we have some really good examples in film canon that studios are more willing to take a chance on making a superhero movie. And I think that audiences are for the first time, like individual people looking at individual members of an audience, and they start going, oh, well, that looks really cool. Like, it never occurred to me to go see a superhero movie before. Because when they think of superhero movies, they think of, like, Superman. A man in tights flying around, not necessarily the deepest movie, and a villain who's sort of over the top. And that's what they go back to in their minds when they think of comic books, or at least that's the way I feel that they think of it. And they don't think that they can really see an interesting, moving, or any kind of story that should be taken seriously. And lately, they've been going to the movies, and because these things are getting out there, because these things have bigger marketing campaigns, I feel like they are ramping up because we are giving them a chance. Not necessarily that the audience is giving them a chance, which I think there sort of has to be a give and take. I think that the studio needs to take a chance in marketing, and then the audience needs to take a chance in going to see it. But I don't think it's peaked by any means. I feel like it's gotten as high as it's ever been. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to get higher. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get higher. I feel like I'm sort of hogging this right now.
No, that's okay. We'll get to the question about peaking in a little bit. Sure. Let me address this myself for a minute. I think 20 years ago, a lot of people didn't think of superhero as a genre or even a subgenre so much. So did more people have interest in superheroes now? Yeah, because they think about superheroes now. You know, back then it was we think about Superman, we think about Batman. You know, those properties had proven themselves in one way or another. Superman was extremely popular as a film franchise, and Batman was also. And then after that, unless you were a comic fan, you weren't necessarily going, well, why haven't we seen this guy in film yet? You know, why haven't we seen this character yet? And I think that superheroes as a subgenre of the action movie, which is the way he seems to be thinking about it too, and it absolutely is. And I mean, like, you know, the superhero movies have now covered a lot of other ground. You know, we talk about Dark Knight as a crime drama. You know, we talk about mystery thrillers and things like that. You know, you have then you have movies like Constantine, which is you know, much more of a horror. You know, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So you know, it really branched out. But I guess my point is, as a genre, it had to, or a subgenre, it had to prove itself still, even beyond Batman and Superman. It wasn't like, okay, since Batman had a couple successful movies, now anything can work. You had to have Spider-Man before you could have the Onslaught. It's as simple as that. Did other movies, well, hold on, that's what I was going to say. Okay. Did other smaller movies have to happen before Spider-Man could happen? Absolutely. But would you have gotten the influx of superhero movies if one of them hadn't blown up the box office? No, absolutely not. Just because X-Men was marginally successful, well, and I mean, it was pretty successful, but that didn't necessarily mean that every you know, superhero property was going to get a big movie. I think the point is you had to have a really big one that proved to studios that that the floodgates could be open to turn this thing into something epic, you know, to really make a lot of money with it. And so, you know, even Blade and X-Men didn't really prove that it could be done. It proved that it should be tried again. But I think that if something as big, it proved that you could do one like Spider-Man and spend a lot of money on it, you know? Because I mean, I think Spider-Man had a bigger budget than X-Men did, and I've not looked at this, and so I don't really know. But I'm pretty sure X-Men was somewhat of a smaller film than the first Spider-Man movie was. And once it did, you know, that whatever 119 million or whatever it was opening weekend, now we can take chances on it, you know? Now, well, first of all, we just made a whole bunch of money, so let's sink that into more projects, you know. But also just we proved that there is some validity to this genre, and then the question was, just like with everything else, was it just the character? Well, maybe not, because we'd already proven that Batman can work. What killed Batman, of course, was Batman and Robin after Batman Forever, and so it took a long time for that to come back. And I think that had a lot to do with why the genre didn't immediately take off, you know. But then once you had Spider-Man, that opened the floodgates. That let us, you know, try more things, and that's why we could have some duds and keep making these things. You know, that's why Daredevil or Elektra couldn't kill the superhero, you know, onslaught.
You know, and I also think that there's something to be said about attaching a major acting talent, a very recognizable face, to movies. I sort of feel that. Like Ben Affleck was a good move for them marketing-wise because he's Ben Affleck. Yeah, you know, Daredevil didn't really underperform. I mean, like people see it as a giant, you know, flop, but it wasn't. It was. I mean, it didn't do huge guns, but like, you know, it was critically unsuccessful, but it wasn't a giant flop. Yeah, I mean. You look at, I mean, of course, the one movie that anybody's going to go to when you talk about an acting talent right now is going to be Iron Man, because that was sort of his resurgence. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. was a guy who existed in Hollywood prior to Iron Man, and he was a very recognizable
Nobody remembers
face.
That now, you know, but that's absolutely true. Yeah, exactly. That was his second wind, as a lot of people like to say. Yeah, so he came back and hit it hard. And then we have other people, Sam Jackson. I mean, these faces are extremely recognizable, and it all culminates into one movie. I feel like, you know, Hollywood is taking a chance, but they're not really taking a chance. That's a great point. And, you know, again, you had to prove it before they would start using those stars. Mm-hmm. Because the way to go before that was always, well, I don't even want to say traditionally because it was only done a couple times, but the big two before that, Superman and Batman, went for relative no-namers, or like, you know, Michael Keaton was known, but he wasn't big. He was known as a comedic actor. Yeah, but he wasn't even that well known. He wasn't A-list yet, you know. Mm-hmm. And if you look at most of if you look at most superhero movies on the whole before we get to the Avengers franchise, which is a total different ballpark, right? But when you get to the Marvel Studios films, they start using more of those guys. They do some no-namers. I mean, like, Hemsworth wasn't real well known, but I don't think. But then he wasn't giant. He wasn't Downey. He was
The only thing I'd seen him in, but prior to Thor, was Star Trek.
He was in Star Trek?
Yeah, I think he was.
Who was he in Star Trek?
I think he played Kirk's dad.
Thinking. Hemsworth?
Yeah.
Thor?
Yeah.
No, he didn't.
I think so.
I'll have to look this up.
Viewers, check for us.
No, I'm going to look it up. Anyway, while we're talking, I'm going to look it up. But all I was going to say is, but before that, they generally went for relative unknowns. And I think you have a really good point, is that they're like, okay, well, now we can make these kinds of movies, but we still got to come up with something to get those non-comic geeks to go.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is that one of the things that we talked about that I think was not necessarily intentional but ended up being a major driving thing was that you make a movie that's a good superhero movie, sure, but it's also a good crime movie, or it's also a good science fiction movie, or it's also a good
other kinds of people in the seat.
Yeah, so if you're not interested in seeing a Batman movie because it's Batman, maybe you're interested to see a movie about a vigilante, or maybe you're interested to see a movie about there are people who like revenge films but don't necessarily like superhero movies. Mm-hmm. There are people who like crime dramas but don't necessarily like the hard-boiled detective. Well, we have a crime fighter. He's a vigilante. He's technically a detective because he's figuring things out. And you get your crime. I mean, you make a movie that works on different levels, and it's not necessarily trying to take a dart and throw it at a dartboard and say, well, we're going to please this demographic by doing this. You're saying, well, if I make this movie, but the character's a superhero, it's not necessarily saying, let's make a movie about a superhero. What'd you find out?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have finally gotten to the first time in history that Vince knows something about Star Trek I don't know.
Woo-hoo!
Well done. He doesn't look anything like that.
No, he didn't.
He bulked up so much for Thor.
He really did.
I mean, he looked like a kid in that movie. Well, he still looks like a kid, kind of. But you know what I mean? Like, he looked really... Wow! All right. You win. Well done. That's amazing.
I was all worried for a second. I was like, do I not know the thing that I know?
No, that's... Well done. Well, I couldn't have told you who it was. I mean, like, it wasn't an actor I knew, but he doesn't look. Yeah. Well, anyway, okay. So, let's get back to this and kind of refocus ourselves with these questions and make sure that we adequately answer everything. So I think that we've pretty well answered the first question is, do general audiences are they more interested in the superhero genre now? And I think we've pretty well answered that. And I think we're both pretty much in agreement that yes, on the whole they are. All you have to do is look at the numbers. Generally they are, and I think that they're more educated. I think that a lot of it is that. I think a lot of people honestly had no idea how big spanning the superhero genre is. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of your average moviegoers, they keep pumping them out, and they're probably and a lot of those people, I would imagine, are like, "Wow, there are this many." I didn't know how big this was.
I think I'm not. Well, I'm going to amend the statement I was about to make. I think you needed a climate in which an actor could feel comfortable being that character.
Thank you for saying that, because that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you hear people in earlier superhero movies, and when I say earlier, I mean the early '90s, talk about how goofy it felt to walk around in those costumes.
And Tobey Maguire still says that. I mean, he's like, it was so weird to be Spider-Man, and people were supportive of it, but like, look, it's Spider-Man. But still, I mean, it's not until Batman Begins and all these other things. Like, I really feel like Iron Man was something that started making actors go, I want to be that guy.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And that's not to say that no actor was interested in being a superhero. That's because, of course, even Michael Chiklis came up to Avi Arad, I think was his name, and said, hey, I'd like to be Ben Grimm. So,
but yeah, there's a legitimacy to it now than there was before. Now it's you become a giant name if you're in a superhero movie.
Exactly.
Before Hemsworth's got his ticket written now. and guys like that. But before what you had, and the new guy playing Bruce Banner, who is not, at least I hadn't heard of him before. I mean, I think he's been around, but I mean, I think he's going to be a bigger name now. Now that he's been in the biggest movie in a lot of years. What you had before was people had to take a chance on superhero movies. You mentioned Chiklis and guys like that. You had people who knew these characters, so they wanted to play those roles, but it was, to a point, a risk for them too, because they were in something that was that's traditionally seen as kid stuff, and it's slowly turned into something that's not kid stuff. And I think that there is somewhat of a correlation between. There's a sort of a correlation with the fact also that comic books are not really for kids anymore also, but that's neither here nor there, because obviously a lot more people are going to see movies than they are reading comic books.
And there's still a general public perception where comics are for children. I mean, it's not...
comics, but not necessarily superheroes. See, that's what's interesting.
We're coming away from it, but it's not the only opinion out there, so anyway.
Yeah,
continue,
I mean, if you look at Avengers, I mean, like... Those guns were so big, you can't say everybody that went had kids. You see what I'm saying? I mean, right. That was a legitimate movie. I mean, people considered that to be, something that adults should go see. It wasn't kid stuff.
I mean, I based part of my opinion off of something that Review Spot said to us in the Avengers review that we did, where he said that his girlfriend at the time was like, "Hey, you want to go see this movie? I think it's called The Avengers." And I'm like, in my head, having been a comic book fan for years, I'm like, how do you not know who the Avengers are?
Yeah, right.
And then I go, well, wait a minute, it's not the Justice League. I mean,
the big question, and this is neither here nor there, because I don't know that this has a lot to do with the questions he's asking us, but I do think it's interesting to note. How would they know?
Yeah, exactly.
How would they know without being into the comics and that sort of thing? This was not the question, but why? Well, actually, to a degree, why are comic movies, working as well now, and could they have worked, as well years before? I think that if you could have gotten this stuff off the ground 20 years ago, the same thing would have happened. I really do, and part of it is because there's a bunch of untapped stories in comic books, and I mean less and less now because we've got a whole bunch of them. I've reviewed almost 100 movies on Superhero Rewind now, and I still have a lot to go. I mean, there's a lot of these things, both big screen and animation, but there's a lot of these things. But what I was going to say is, if you go back years and years ago, what were people mining for stories for movies? They were mining books,
right?
And every major, not every, but most. Nearly all, major works of fiction have been made into movies, and many of them now more than one time. And then Disney at one point cornered the market on fairy tales, and so like all these things, and then most stage musicals have now had movie versions. The only thing that was left with a lot of really big, iconic stories, at least to a group of people, that was left for movies to be made of, besides adaptations of TV shows or remakes of other movies, was comic books. So what you're looking at is this huge mountain of stories that had never been fictionalized in any other way.
Yeah.
Ever. I think that's huge.
I feel like this has sort of been developed in the only way that it really could, which is you have movies that are not necessarily based on superheroes. You have comic book movies that are not necessarily based on superheroes, and that lets them go, well, maybe we can mine this little area for comics and get ideas from this. And that's obviously been DC's approach or Warner Brothers' approach, because they haven't been doing all of their superheroes.
Yeah.
They have waited.
Yeah, and I kind of hate that they haven't, but at the same time, it's kind of diversified their studio a bit, because they're reaching for comic stories that not everybody knows are comics.
And I think that's to their benefit.
Do you mind if I tell my 300 story real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
You know what I'm going to say.
Yeah,
Did I tell you about
yeah.
this? Okay, so what happened? I think I told you about this recently.
You did.
Well, the point I'm going to make with this story is that sometimes even us giant comic book fans, this will happen to us. I wasn't reading current comics at the time that 300 came out. I collected a lot of comics, but I wasn't reading current at the time. And I went to the theater to see some other movie with my wife, and we saw a preview for 300. And Sarah said, "That looks awesome. We should totally go see that." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And so we went. And all through the movie, I was thinking, because I was already doing. I don't know if I was doing Rewind or not yet, but I went. It seemed like I wasn't going to the movies much, and it seemed like the only time I did was when a superhero movie came out. So I was sitting in the audience, and the whole time I was thinking, this is awesome. For once, I'm going to the movie theater and not seeing a comic book movie. And then it gets to the end, and it gets to the end credits, and it says based on the comic by Frank Miller, and I went, I can't win, you know. And then and I felt kind of dumb for not knowing about it, but again, I wasn't keeping up much at the time with current, and that probably wouldn't happen now, but I was just like, really, and so, my point is, if I didn't know, most of the people going didn't know that it was a comic movie, and so it seemed, that and Sin City and Wanted and all these different movies, V for Vendetta, all these different movies that are based on comics that don't necessarily scream this must have been a comic book first. It's diversifying that studio.
Yeah,
those are all DC. Those are all Warner properties.
I think the only movie that I saw that I didn't realize was a comic book before I saw it was Road to Perdition.
And fair enough, yeah.
From
Hell
was
one
Hell.
for me. I didn't know that.
I haven't seen it, but I did hear about it being a comic book. I was like, well, maybe I should see it.
Yeah.
But, then you have the reverse. You have people like me. They're like, I'll go see it if it's a comic book movie.
Right. Well, I kind of have that too, but it's mostly just because I review them. But
I sort of feel like reality has developed.
But we're mining these stories, and I think it's a really good thing that we're mining them.
I feel like that's paved the way for superheroes, but I think that we sort of have this develop up of superheroes like Spider-Man is a man in tights. That's what it's about. The bad guys versus the good guys, and then you have Batman, a man in armor. And you have Iron Man, man literally in armor.
Yeah.
And then we have this sort of, I think that's really what got superheroes in the forefront. We have certain hits that people go, well, I'm going to go see Batman. Why? Because it's Batman. And it turns out to not just be about a man in tights.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, well, I'm going to go see Iron Man. Why? Because it's a guy with a freaking robot suit that looks cool. And I know it's not a robot suit, but still, people look at that and they say, that's really neat.
Oh, there's AI in his head. I mean, in the helmet.
So they're not sitting there saying to themselves, I'm going to go see a superhero movie. They're like, I'm going to go see a movie about a guy in that really neat armor.
I think that's a great point. I mean, I think some people still, to this day, go, oh, a superhero movie, those all have the same formula, and sometimes they're right, Yeah. Not that they all have it, but sometimes, I mean, like, again, I don't mean to bash this every chance I get, but it's a good example at the moment. I always say that the Green Lantern movie was the Green Lantern movie that would have been made 10 years ago, and that somebody didn't get the memo that we're doing those differently now. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where that really felt like it fit the mold of the superhero origin movie circa Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2002, Right. And I mean, like, we've kind of gotten over that, and I'm not saying that there's like, I'm not saying that there weren't a lot of merits to that movie, I'm just saying that did absolutely set a mold, a lot of what I consider to be the really stereotypical things that are done with superhero movies started there. And some of them started in '89, but I mean, a lot of them were really solidified there. And the best superhero movies find ways to either get out of that or make it to where you don't notice it because something else is working really well in it, And so, I think we should really focus on this second question real quick. We've already really touched on it, but I just want to solidify this and make sure that we've really answered it, which is, if the superhero genre is more popular now, why? And he says, is it simply an extension of people's enjoyment of action movies, or is there something deeper? I want to focus on that a little bit. You said that it wasn't that people are just going, oh, a superhero movie, I gotta go see that. And I think you're right. And again, I think some people do the opposite. I think some people go, oh, superhero movie, I'm tired of those, I'm not gonna go. Yeah. But that doesn't seem to be the general audience, that doesn't seem to be the general population. If it's already something that's proven itself, like you said, people are going to go see Iron Man, people are going to go see Batman and Spider-Man, and very possibly they're going to try out Superman. Beyond that, one they've never heard before, is it going to work just because it's a superhero movie? Probably not. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like the other day we were talking about Lobo and things like that. Like, just because it's based on a comic book movie doesn't automatically mean it's gonna make it.
Yeah.
And so that's absolutely something to keep in mind. So, like, why are these things working now? Some of it is because it's a character that's proven itself. And I really think some of it is what people talk about with the modern mythology. The fact that these are characters that are really deep in the country's, like, collective consciousness now. And it seems like, especially, and I say country, kind of the world now, at least a lot of the world, but especially for America, it's kind of, we pride ourselves on these are these giant characters. It's like our modern mythology, and we created them. You know.
Mm-hmm. I mean, comic books and jazz and westerns. I mean,
those are ours.
It's an American thing, even if not all those came out of America. I mean, a significant amount of westerns came out of Italy. So, jazz, a lot of jazz was developed in Europe.
And Japanese people actually read and buy comic books.
Yeah,
you know, much more than we do.
Exactly. So,
much more than we do.
You know, just because it was originated in America doesn't necessarily mean that no other cultures contribute to it. But I mean, obviously, look at Judge Dredd. But which IDW is putting out a Judge Dredd comic, I might pick it.
And there's a movie coming out this year, and I'm kind of excited to see how that works out. I like Carl Urban a lot, so I hope it rocks.
I don't have much of an opinion about Carl Urban, and I hope this gives me one.
Yeah.
But
well, he sold me with bones in Star Trek. So.
No, he was good in Star Trek, and I just haven't seen much where I was like, oh wait, that was Carl Urban.
Oh well, fair enough. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what I know of him. But like the fact that would not have been my first pick for Bones, and then he totally nailed it. So so I'm hoping the same thing happens with Dredd, because I'm looking at him and going, well, it's not. He doesn't seem like the guy to put on the Dredd helmet. But then I'm like, well, he seems to be kind of a character actor. You know, he seems to be able to really put himself in somebody's shoes, at least. Like you said, I got one example, but, you know.
Yeah, you know, that's something that I kind of respect about actors, is or certain actors like Carl Urban here. And it's not even that he's doing justice to Dredd. He's just doing what he should do. It's an actor that should say, I am less important than the character.
Yeah,
and
sure.
He keeps the helmet on. I mean, I'm not going to say that Inspector Gadget's a great movie, but Dr. Claw's face is on the cover of the movie.
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't even see the guy's face in the cartoon.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that was the defining characteristic, and you blew it.
Yeah,
on purpose,
or at least I think he was on the cover. I don't know.
Stupid. Know, we did see his face in that movie.
So
I think
so.
It's been a long time. I saw that movie one time and had no desire to see it again.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry.
But back to the topic at hand.
Yeah, right. Go ahead.
Oh wait, what was the topic?
It wasn't Judge Dredd. That's all I know.
This is true. It was action movies.
Yeah. I mean, how much does that play into it? Because I mean, there are other action movies that come out, but absolutely, superhero is really filling that void in a lot of ways.
You know, I think that people get their action where they get it, and I don't necessarily think that people are like, how many times can you make a movie about a man with a gun? Well, apparently a lot. So, I mean, you can do something from as simple as Death Wish to something as ridiculous as Commando. I mean, one is a little bit more cartoony than the other. And granted, for some people are like, what's Death Wish? Or what's Commando? Or what are these movies that came out prior to 2001? But I feel like superheroes are. I think if you were to come around about 5 years ago and said, "Are you tired of superhero movies?" you would have found more people that would say yes than they would now.
Interesting.
I really do, because I feel like
so you think Iron Man and Dark Knight just saved it?
Yeah, I really do. I feel like Iron Man and Dark Knight was sort of selling it to people, and I think Marvel really, really amped up their game when they started doing this huge marketing campaign for Avengers, and you've gotten more people interested in that, and people are, well, let's go see this. Why? Not because it's about superheroes, but because it's about huge amounts of action, and that's what I want to see.
And for some of us, because it's about something.
Yeah, yeah, it's
beyond just somebody putting on a costume.
Exactly. And, you have people that are going to interact with each other. It's not just going to be bad guys versus good guys. And, that there's... I mean, even the trailers for Avengers, the characters were stressing against each other. And I think that people are like, oh, that's drama. Let's go see that.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
So, that there's going to be conflict. That there's going to be more than just the traditional, let's hit the bad guy. Or let's put on a costume.
I just thought of another component to this, and tell me if you agree with this. I think part of the thing, too, with why superhero movies are so popular right now is that they're filling a void, in another kind of void, which is family films. Because there aren't as many of them as there used to be. And when we think of family films these days, we think of cartoons. And it's the same problem we have with all ages comics, right? It's that anything all ages means it must be for children. And superhero on the whole... for the most part. We're not talking about Watchmen, which a lot of parents walked out of, and I think that's really telling, and I'll get to that in a second. But when you have most superhero movies, I mean, even though they're all still pretty much PG-13, but what's not these days? We don't have a lot of PG, and there's almost no G at all, except for the occasional cartoon.
Yeah.
Even most of DreamWorks is PG, and even a lot of Pixar is PG. But when you look at superhero movies, they're still considered generally more family friendly than a lot of other things out there, and I think that you still do to a degree have the air quote stigma of superheroes are for kids. But I think like we were saying earlier, it's less now that they're for kids and more that it's okay for kids to see them because that's where it started, And I think that we still, I don't know about you, but I get surprised when a movie based on a superhero character that has traditionally been a really family friendly kind of character seems more violent than I would want to take my kid to. I get surprised by that. I'm not surprised that Punisher is too violent. But I'm I would be surprised if I went to Amazing Spider-Man and it was as dark as it looks in the trailers. I would be a little surprised by that because that is a movie that you're going to market really heavily to kids.
Yeah, and I mean, you can go to a toy section and see Spider-Man masks and lizard masks, which that kind of surprised me to see a lizard mask.
Yeah,
and because it's not,
and it's pretty gruesome looking.
Yeah, and, it's not like a lizard mask, like let's put on this lizard costume and run around. It's designed to look like they have a Captain America mask, they have a Thor helmet, they have an Iron Man mask, and so this is a creature's face. It's not a mask.
Yeah, well, no, that's true. Yeah, it's like a Halloween mask or something. Almost.
So it's kind of creepy. And
but remember that you and I both, I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think both of us, when Dark Knight came out, were kind of complaining about all the kid marketing for that movie. It was like really, there are storybooks with that Joker in them. That's weird, I
always thought the really goofy looking Joker figure that they put out was the one that looked like a clown rather than the Joker.
It was like this attempt at trying to make it look kid friendly because you couldn't market it the other way.
And then they put a
kids.
Two-Face out, and it was all boogered up.
Well, I think that was just a crappy line, honestly. But.
Yeah, it was a crappy line of figures, but I was a little surprised to see what they did with it. But I don't know. I didn't quite I understand why they do these things, but I sometimes I even forget. I'll admit. I was talking to this man the other day, and I said that I think attaching Zack Snyder to Superman, Man of Steel rather, is going to put butts in the seats. And
yeah, absolutely.
And what the guy said to me was, well, people are going to take their kids to that movie. And I was like, oh, my God, I forgot that people even take kids to see superhero movies anymore.
But that's a really good point, because they will. Because you will expect that to be safe. And then you'll have fans that keep up more than most people who will go, excuse me, they don't do that. Who go, well, don't you know Zack Snyder? Didn't you see Watchmen? Don't you know the kinds of movies? Didn't you see 300? Don't you know the kinds of movies that he makes? I'm like, no, not necessarily. A lot of people, even if they did see those movies, it will never even occur to them who the director is. When I started talking about directors of movies, when I started writing blogs, I mean, like, not everybody keeps up with who made the thing. A lot of people just go see them, you know what I mean? Not everybody has to be a blogger, Some people have other things to do. Some people might have better things to do. I don't know. But you
live life, meet women.
What go to work. What? But you see my point. I wanted to mention the thing about Watchmen, where you had parents who brought their kids to that movie, and a lot of people, like me at first when I first heard this, was like, God, didn't you see the frickin' trailers? Like, and some people said, well, yeah, it looked like a consummate action movie, and I was like, well, I guess to a point, but it still looked a little bit darker than most superhero movies. But the point is, if you didn't do more research than just see a trailer, and some people probably didn't even do that. Some people probably just saw a poster or something and went, oh, or heard, or probably more of them. It was their kids went, ooh, a superhero movie. Then they go to their parents and say, take me to this, and the parents don't research it first and they just take them, And so I think that is really telling. And my point is, I think that backs up what I was saying earlier, that superheroes are generally considered safe. If they weren't, parents wouldn't have taken their kids to Watchmen.
Maybe Watchmen being marketed as a straight action movie was necessary for the development superheroes as a viable character, as opposed to just a genre where people put on tights and fight bad guys.
Maybe so, although it didn't perform huge guns. I think it's going to be largely forgotten.
Oh,
well, not really. It won't be forgotten by us, comic book fans. I think that them's fighting words, but it wasn't, and I think that it probably did really well in DVDs. You know what I mean? But I mean, like, I think it made its money back. But I mean, it wasn't Dark Knight. It wasn't huge.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is that people go to that movie expecting to see something that's traditional, what they've already seen before.
Sure. Yeah.
What we're kind of looking at is the different, like we could almost say traditional superhero movie and revisionist superhero movie, like you would with westerns. I mean, you could say that.
I think you made the argument that Dark Knight and even Begins to a degree are revisionist superhero movies.
I mean, I would agree with that too.
The difference there, of course, is that there were a lot more westerns before you had the revisionist westerns,
which is why we haven't divided it.
That. But I think that, but I could imagine that we might later on after a lot of reboots, you know what I'm saying? Like, but no, that's fair. It's a really good point.
You know, I think that
it's a really good point.
Parents who take their kids to see these movies and then they're surprised by it is almost the best marketing for superhero movies that they could have asked for, because people go, "Wow, this is really inappropriate," and it's about that too. I'm gonna think twice about when I see a superhero movie. Not necessarily to say that I'm going to be nervous to go see one, but maybe I'm not going to prejudge it.
Maybe we should, maybe just on the whole, we should do a little bit more research before we take our children to see things.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, all you have to do, you don't have to know anything else about that movie other than look at a poster and it says it's rated R. That's all you should have to know. There is no way that a rated R superhero movie is going to be okay for kids. Right?
Well, sometimes people are not bright. I've seen
Kick-Ass is the same way.
Yeah. I've seen old people take extremely young kids to go see Nightmare on Elm Street. Really?
Freddy vs. Jason, I saw kids at.
That's what it was that I was talking about. I mean, I didn't actually see any kids at the new Nightmare.
I did it at Freddy vs. Jason. I couldn't believe it.
And people are just dumb. I mean, why would you do that?
Yeah.
But then again, you know, some granny.
I felt bad for those kids. Like I don't like seeing a movie like that when with kids in the audience, because then the whole thing, all I can think about, like, I'm distracted. I'm just like, oh God, I feel bad for these kids seeing the scene I'm seeing right now.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what it is. It's that old lady. She's like, "What do you want to see today?"
That's right.
And the kids were like, "Well, let's go see Freddy vs. Jason," and because they want to see it.
And there's a GameStop across the street, and guess what? She bought him there. Right?
Video games?
No, probably something hugely inappropriate, like Call of Duty or
I mean, those things have a little sign on this say 17 and up.
My point is, though, I've seen a lot of parents, but especially like grandparents, buy kids these really inappropriate games where it says, you know, it's in for mature, and then the grandmother will be like, Grand Theft Auto is what I was going to say, but you'll have a grandmother who's like, well, their parents said it was okay, you know, and so then they buy it. But what I'm saying is, it's the same kind of mentality. It's a video game, so it's for kids, you know. Yeah. It's a superhero movie, so it's for kids. Well, not necessarily. Do some research, you know.
There's some old lady. I was looking at video games the other day, and this old lady's like, I can't find Lollipop Chainsaw, and I think that's what that game's called. And I said,
oh, you know, I was going to tell you. You told me the story, and the other day I was at a Target, and I saw that game, and I went, "It actually exists. Yep. This is real. What is it?"
I think it's a game where you play a woman wearing extremely tight-fitting clothes, using a chainsaw and killing things in very gruesome ways. I haven't played it, but I think that's what it's about, because that's what it looks like. It's on the cover.
Yeah, okay.
So I look at that, and I'm like, well, first of all, that sort of is indicative of what people think is awesome, quote-unquote. These days, like, this is what we're calling good entertainment. Now, maybe it's a fun game. I don't know. I might be open to playing it, but stylistically, I'm opposed to it because I think it's ridiculous. Not necessarily that it's inappropriate for anybody, but that it's ridiculous.
Vince, you never heard the old adage that the old Chinese proverb that chainsaws make everything better?
Indeed, like, chainsaws and eye patches, chainsaws, lollipops, and rainbows.
You know, actually, that's gonna be stuck in my head all night. But I got a fortune cookie that said that one day. Soon you will get a chainsaw and it will make everything better.
To make anybody feel better about this, the old lady who was buying the game, I was like, "Who are you buying that for?" And she was like, "Oh, my granddaughter. She's 17." I'm like, "Okay, whatever. She's 17. I guess she's fine." But
well, let's go ahead and hit this last question, unless you had a place you were going and I totally messed you up.
I thought about going to Pizza Hut.
Well, okay, so we're going to finish this really quick, so we can go to Pizza Hut. No, I'm kidding. This last thing you started to cover at the beginning, and I just want to do this in order, so we'll go ahead and get to it now. Like I said, we're nearly 40 minutes in, so we'll go ahead and try to cover this in 5 or 10 minutes, which means this will be an hour. Okay, so the last bit of this, and I hope we covered the first two. Okay, the last bit of this was: do you think we've seen a peak in interest in the genre with Avengers and Dark Knight Rises, or is there more room to go? Now, you very quickly, definitively said we've not seen the peak.
Yeah, all I said we could have seen the peak, but that I don't necessarily think that we have definitively seen the peak.
I want to say that it is possible that we have.
Yeah, exactly.
I do want to throw that out there. I think that Dark Knight Rises is going to be really telling. Mm-hmm. I think that if that movie, I mean, I think most people would say, oh, naturally that movie is going to do big guns. Mm-hmm. It's extremely debatable if it can possibly hit what Avengers did. But I mean, because before Avengers, a lot of people were going, yeah, Dark Knight Rises is going to beat Avengers. And now I'm just like, well, Avengers sort of smoked the universe. Like, I'm not sure, it definitely had quite the opening hand. You know, I'm going to be really impressed with Rises if it can even touch it at this point. But I still think that it will probably be really big. But the question is, will it be good? I think that's really important. And I mean, Spider-Man 3 did huge, but it wasn't. But a lot of people didn't like it. It was mostly panned by critics, and so people aren't real sure how well Amazing Spider-Man is going to do. And I've always said, because of what that character is, honestly, I don't think it's going to matter who's making it and how good it is. It's going to do well. I think the only thing that might... I'm sorry, I'm all over the place right now. I think the only thing that might hurt Amazing Spider-Man is the fact that we already have 2 other really huge, giant superhero movies over the summer, and then it just becomes a question of pocketbooks and if people want to go to all of them. So anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think that this potential trend... I mean, we could have seen the peak provided a couple things happen. If Marvel decides what they need to do is quantity over quality, then we will see a decline in people being interested in superhero movies. If DC decides...
If you look at their plan, it looks like they've already done that.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying, is that if their movies... if they're
now,
not
they might all be super awesome, but they're definitely going to make quite a few before Avengers 2 comes out.
I feel like you could potentially oversaturate the market, but I think as long as the grace percent of them are good, you're going to at least keep interest, but that would still potentially cause a peak. I think if you restrict yourselves a little bit, if you don't say, well, we're going to put everything out there at once and make as much money as we can because who knows how long this is going to last, you could really burn out your audience.
And isn't that an unfortunate mentality when you say, well, we've got to knock this out as quick as possible because it might not last, and then it never occurs to you that putting it all out there is precisely the thing that is most likely to make it not last.
Yeah, it's like, no, please watch our movies. Okay, geez, calm down.
Yeah, I think people still sometimes. This is my ridiculous analogy. I think people still sometimes will try to make their ice cream last as long as they can. Where they're really trying to save the flavor, and I sometimes think that movie studios should have that same kind of mentality, where you whet people's palates, but you don't give them everything they want right away, because if you string it out a little bit, it's going to be more satisfying.
Yeah, everything in moderation. If you eat your ice cream really fast, what happens? You get brain freeze.
You're going to get a headache, and you might not feel like having ice cream tomorrow.
Exactly.
And you're going to have the exact same, kind of thing with the movies. And, I feel really good about this analogy. I don't think that we can possibly stretch it any further, so I think we should probably move away from it now.
That's fair. That's the thing, is that I kind of wonder how DC's really going to play into this, because it seems to be that they're like, well, now's the time to move. Well, yeah, now is the time to move, but let's be smart about it. Let's sort of test the playing field. Let's make things that are quality first.
Now is and I don't know if you're going to agree with this or not, what they're acting like is we've got to, or at least according to the stuff we've read, and we still don't know how confirmed that is. I know a lot of people think that the article that we talked about in GNN last week is kind of bunk, but then a lot of other people think that it's true, so it's really hard to tell right now. But anyway, if what we've read is true, and they're going to, start putting these out really quickly, and they're going to do Justice League kind of early, and then some stuff after it, that sort of thing. Tell me if you agree with this or not. When you said this is the time to move, this is the time to make The Flash. You know, this is the time to make Wonder
literally move.
But this is the time to make The Flash or Wonder Woman. This is the time to do what Marvel did and put out that character that has never been seen before and change the face of it. You see what I'm saying?
I would agree with that.
Why did Iron Man work? It wasn't because they had the successful marketing formula that anybody could copy and make. No, it's not that. And we need to get out of that mentality because Hollywood always thinks that and it never works. Or not always, but often. What it was that we went to Iron Man and we went, geez, this is fresh. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen this before. This is fresh. This I can't think of another character that is just like Tony Stark. He seems like a new archetype.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Now, he's not a new archetype. He was pretty much that in the comics. But the other thing that's different about Iron Man is that movie improved on the comics. I like Iron Man now more because of the movie. That's unusual, you know? And so what DC needs to do, the only, or Warner's, the only formula, air quotes, they need to copy is taking a character that we haven't seen yet in film, not a reboot, not a remake, somebody we haven't had the chance to see in a big budget production yet, and make it fresh and make it something that inspires people to come back. And that's what we have with Iron Man, and Iron Man is the reason Avengers was successful.
Yeah, I think The Flash is a good place to go. I think Wonder Woman would still be a little questionable for people, even though Linda Carter had her thing back in the day.
And a lot of that is because, you know, we have seen it before, and we've seen it tried and tried again, you know, and especially us comic book fans, we've seen it tried in the comics 1,000 different ways and that sort of thing. People are having a really hard time getting a good handle on who that character should be. But Flash is a pretty definitive kind of character, you know. You can pretty much translate that to screen, and all you got to do is make it charismatic like you did Iron Man. That's really the one thing I'd say is make it a charismatic kind of character.
Yeah, make him somebody that you want to like.
Or
that's
at least,
not necessarily because he's the good guy.
Yeah, I don't know if charismatic's the right word. I mean, you know, Barry Allen or Wally West or whoever you'd use would not necessarily be the character that, you know, would make these great hilarious speeches or whatever.
Let's use the word interesting. I mean, I think charismatic's a good word, but you know, Tony Stark is interesting because he's charismatic. What would Wally West be interesting for? And I'm not saying...
I wouldn't call Bruce Wayne charismatic, but he's interesting, yeah.
I mean, I think those are things that need to happen, but I don't think those things should be the goal. I mean, I think people set out with an Iron Man movie thinking, I'm going to make a movie about this that stars this guy.
Yeah, that's right.
And...
so they got lucky, too, because there was a major actor living who was pretty much that guy. I mean, you know, they got lucky with that.
Yeah. You know, that's the thing, is that for those of us who don't know that, he was an alcoholic. He had a lot of problems. He, meaning Tony Stark and Robert Downey Jr.
Part of the reason that Robert Downey Jr. was so amazing in that movie was because it hit so close to home to him, and because he and Tony Stark had an extremely similar past.
Yeah, so...
Not that he was ever, like, trapped in a cave and he had to make his own suit to get out, but other than that,
well,
they had similar pasts.
I have heard him say about his chest itching from that shrapnel near his heart. But, I'm kidding.
So you don't think we've hit the peak necessarily?
I don't think that we have definitively hit the peak, but I feel like it could keep ramping up, but I do feel like it's Hollywood's style to oversaturate with things that people find interesting, and I feel like it's likely that we have hit the peak.
Can I ask you this question? Because we might as well drag this out since it's already way longer than we wanted it to be. No, I'm kidding. Well, let me ask you this question. Does the fact that Avengers was so ridiculously successful mean that people are hungry for more? Or does it mean that they were waiting for that thing that had never been done before, it's been done, now they're satiated?
I would almost lean towards the latter, because I sort of feel like people were... Like, I feel like this is the first time people have really jumped up and went, oh, that looks cool. Like, I feel like people have sort of looked at superhero trailers and things of that kind as white noise, and they go, it's just an action movie, whatever. But when they find that this is the major movie of the summer, I feel like this happens a lot. I feel like there is one thing in a lot of different genres or mediums that people look for every year. They're like, okay, there's that big hot button toy that everybody wants. There's that big movie that everybody's going to go see. And there's that big novel that's being released by that big writer that everybody wants to read.
And back when people made music, we had that with albums, too.
But, yeah.
But, you know.
I mean, and we have groups of things that are successful.
Mostly kidding.
You have a point, but it's all on iTunes now, so...
I had no idea American Pie was actually going to come to fruition. I didn't know that you would actually have the day the music died, but no, I'm kidding. Yeah,
Aww.
I'm bitter. I want more decent rock music, and I don't know where it is. Anyway,
And
I'm sorry.
fair. But you know where it is? It's in all the bars and pubs that nobody's listening to.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, but that's hard to get to. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. There are things that people will like because they are told to like it, and music is a terrific point. People will go, well, what is it that people are downloading right now that I should be listening to? What is it in theaters that people are watching that I should be watching? And that thing this year was the Avengers.
I agree that this happens. I don't think that happened with Avengers. I don't think people went because they were told to. I think people really were... I think Marvel's whole plan worked. I think people were really... But I don't think it's because Marvel told them to go. I think people were genuinely excited to see a bunch of characters from different movies in the same movie because it hasn't been done before. You see what I'm saying? I think people were actually genuinely excited about that. I don't think on the whole it was a fad thing. I really don't. Now, having said that, now we've seen it. Now that's happened. Now we have had a bunch of characters from successful, marginally successful movies all put in the same movie, and we got to see that. And so, if that was the big token thing that everybody was excited about that, if that was the big flavor of the month, then we've had that now, and who knows if another one can be as big and as successful. I don't think Thanos is going to sell Avengers 2 as hard to lay people as it will to people like you and me who know who Thanos is. You know, so but you see my point. So I'm not sure if I completely 100% agree with you that people went because they were told to. Well, maybe after the first week, maybe there were people who were like, oh, it did all the. But I don't think that's why the opening weekend was so huge.
Well, let me say it this way. I feel like Avengers was the movie to see this year, and that's what they got. Like,
absolutely.
That was the thing.
It was the movie to see, but I think it was legitimately the movie to see.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that there's no legitimacy to it. I mean, obviously,
sure.
there was a steady build, and it fostered interest, and it did what it had to do to get people to see something that they ordinarily would not have gone to see.
So I just thought you were seeing it as like a really negative thing. Like, it's the fad, people were told they had to go. And I'm just like, no, I think that it deserved it,
Yeah, sometimes things are deserving, sometimes they're not. My negativity was sort of piggybacking on the idea of music.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Because, I'm just saying, I'm not sure that the same thing happened. I think it's a little different.
But I think there are certain things that either earn its spot or are given its spot in the limelight for that year. And this year it was Avengers, and I'm not necessarily certain that we're going to get that again, but I think it could happen again. And I think we're not going to look at something that's like a steady incline. I think we're going to look at something that's a little bit of a wavier line, a little bit more like an EKG chart, Mm-hmm. So it's going to come down, it's going to go back up when people are interested, and when things are actually good, or at least actually really exciting. And that's what people want. That's what people need.
I'm hearing a theory going around a little bit here and there right now that this hasn't been greatly talked about, but I think it's interesting that movies are, to a degree, becoming the new TV, where you have a film and it's almost like a pilot where the studio sees if it performs, and then if it does, they make more. Where like everything's a franchise now. Not everything, but a lot of things. If it's not like a remake of a one-shot movie, it seems like a lot of the time, it's a studio trying to build a franchise. And my question to you, and also what we're seeing happening some now too. By the way, I want to give credit to this for Pastor Dice, the YouTube channel. His name is Pastor Dice. We've had him on before. We did a podcast with him about Pixar movies, and I watched one of Dice's videos the other day, rather, and he was talking about this, and he was talking about I think it was Snow White and the Huntsman, where they were already talking about doing a sequel, and it didn't even perform that well opening weekend, and like they were already they noticed that and they didn't care. They were already planning on maybe doing a sequel, and so now it's almost to the point where, and that happens with other things too, where it's like, it doesn't even have to perform that well. They still might make a sequel. We even heard about that with Green Lantern. It was like, well, it didn't do very well. They're already talking about a sequel, even though it didn't perform that well. It's like the new TV. It's like we got to see if, it's like if it does well enough that a second one might be bigger than the first one, they'll still maybe make it because it's all about making, a franchise. So anyway, all of that aside, my question to you is, do you think that superhero movies have something to do with that? Do you think that what Marvel did has something to do with that trend?
That's hard. I don't know. I mean, I sort of feel like that's just the way Hollywood's been for years and years. And not to say that that's where Hollywood originated, but I feel like, I mean, even look at the Universal movies back in the day, the Universal Monsters, rather. Universal movies have been around for a long time. But the Universal Monsters, I mean, you have Frankenstein, Wolfman, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, Bride of Frankenstein, Wolfman punches Frankenstein in his kid's face, or something, whatever he decides to do.
The difference is, though, those were a little bit more like Bond, where they were just like... they started over every time. Like they weren't. There was no continuity to those movies. For the most part.
Yeah.
A lot of them like contradicted things the earlier ones had done, and kind of didn't even think about them. And
yeah, I mean that's a fair statement. I'm just sort of saying.
I see what you're saying. I mean, yeah, it's a franchise thing, but it doesn't resemble television. And that's the new trend that I'm talking about.
I think that's an interesting idea. I'm not going to disagree with it. I sort of feel like this is where Hollywood's been heading, regardless of whether it was like television initially or not. But people would make something with the idea that they could make something that could make money off of the original idea.
Yeah, but eventually they'd end it. We don't usually go beyond trilogies, And I mean, like, it seems like maybe the direction they're trying to go is to do. This is neither here nor there. I just think it's interesting, and I do wonder if the whole Avengers thing has a little bit to do with this, because you can definitely look at those movies as a bunch of sequels in a franchise.
I think people are really excited with that idea in their mind right now. Like, oh man, we can just ramp up and make 1 million of these things.
Well, and now that I'm thinking about it, I bet Harry Potter had a lot more to do with it. Because they could get one of those out every year and a half, and after a while, it did kind of feel like a TV show. It's like, wow, I'm going to watch 8 of these. That's like a mini series.
I sort of feel like novels are really the thing that got it going. Now that you said that, makes a lot of sense, because you have like people are always like, well, what's the next Harry Potter? What's the next Twilight? What's the next this and that? Well, I guess whatever the big selling thing is that people are really interested in right now. Maybe the next Twilight is the next Avengers, or even hopefully it's not the next Avengers, because it wasn't that great of a cartoon.
Okay, yes, now I know what you're talking about. Okay, I was like, there was a Twilight cartoon? Oh no, next okay. Anyway. That was just a direct-to-video movie.
It was, but it was a cartoon.
Oh, was it good?
It was okay.
I haven't watched it yet.
They brought it into the actual Avengers comic book, Bendis did.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, I didn't read more than the first issue because it was a freebie, like a week before free comic book day.
Well, we're coming up on an hour. I sure hope that we sufficiently answered this guy's questions, and good luck on your work, on your paper. Hey, thanks everybody for listening. I sure hope you enjoyed our extra long podcast this week. And Vince, do you have anything to close us with?
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So till next time,
I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince.
And we'll see you next time on Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast.